This is The Week on WURD, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from WURD Radio. You can listen to WURD Radio anytime, anywhere on WURDradio.com and the WURD Radio app. So give us a play and download it today. In this episode, George Fatheree is the founder of Black Land Loss Narrative Project, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to collecting, preserving, and amplifying the overlooked stories of Black land loss in America. He joined Wake Up With WURD and discussed how Black Americans are continuously affected by the wealth and land disparity. And Natasha Terrell and Jasmine Anderson are the hosts of the podcast Travel Fly Sexy, a show providing travel tips and tricks. They both joined Reality Check with Tonya Pendleton and talked about what travel locations might need more caution with global tariffs and how anti-American sentiments could play out when traveling abroad. But first, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is a Vanderbilt University professor and author. Dr. Dyson joined Evening WURDs to discuss the State of the People Power Tour, reflect on the 5th year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and provide commentary on the current state of Black affairs in the country.
I am always excited and humbled to welcome to this program Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, university professor at Vanderbilt University down there in the great city of Nashville, Tennessee. Also the author of some 27 books, many of them New York Times bestsellers. I don't want to take up too much time to run down that list, but Dr. Dyson is currently in Detroit for the State of the People Power Tour. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, welcome to Evening WURDs.
Dr. James Peterson, always great to be on the radio with you, my friend.
Bro, I know you're busy and you're between programs, but for people who maybe have not yet heard of the State of the People Power Tour, can you talk about this project? It's comprehensive in scope. A lot of folks are involved. I think there's at least 10 stops on the tour. You're home right now at the Detroit stop. But help folks understand what State of the People Power has been all about.
Yes, sir. Well, it's been put together by the great Angela Rye and the great Joanne Reed and the great Dr. David Johns and many others. It's been a group. It's been a truly a SNCC pattern, multiple leaderful group of people who have organized this. But, of course, the guiding lights, Angela Rye and Joanne Reed and David Johns. But it's an incredible collection of people. They go to every city. This is one of 10 cities that the State of the People Power Tour is happening. And it's an attempt on the first day, yesterday. We do social service. We render service. We engage people. We have panels addressing their needs. They were passing out gas cards. Can you imagine, Doc, passing out gas cards? People need gas.
Can I get one of them? Can I get one of them gas cards?
I know, because we ain't dealing with no Tesla right now. But anyway, so the thing is that we're doing those kind of practical things. I was involved with the great Jalen Rose, another great Detroiter, as we were passing out food at his school, at his Jalen Rose Academy, which is a charter school in Detroit, Michigan. No state funding, no money from anybody. And it's an incredible school, Doc. And we were passing out food there and stuff. And then today, we're about to have a rally. We visited the detention center earlier, had an extraordinary conversation with the young 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. You know how depressing that is. You wrote a great book on it in terms of the Incarceral Project and the ways in which the prison industrial complex operates. So the rally this afternoon, Jessica Care Moore and many others will be involved, and we're trying to rally the troops. We're trying to galvanize political opposition to this sad moment. I'm sure you saw the news today that your president of the United States of America has denied Harvard the ability to enroll foreign students. This is a gesture of such ridiculous fascism and an autocracy and the politics of vengeance and pettiness that is depressing. But we have to raise our voices, stand up for the truth, and tell it wherever we are. And that's what this tour is all about. To tell people we have power. We have the ability to say no. And it's a rejection of the premise And the notion that black people, especially black women, are not involved this time around. Black people are being silent. Well, if it was true, we didn't earn the right to do so. But
That's
it's
right.
not true. We're simply understanding that, white brothers and sisters and other non-black people have to be deeply invested and involved too, because we've carried the weight in the water, and we need allies to, help us raise the bloodstained banner of truth, justice, and democracy, and especially resistance. So that's what these gatherings are all about.
Yeah, again, state of the people power tour, Doc, and it's great that you're involved in it. Thank you for bringing me into that work as well. I know there'll be some black papers that will come out of this that folks will be able to see kind of what the whole process is.
Released. I think they're releasing them here in Detroit. So your brilliant work will be released, and thank you for doing that work, man, because they asked me and I said, no, I got the man. Dr. James Peters. And they always be like, Michael Eric Dyson, who? Yeah, when that brother steps up to the plate. Thank you for doing your typical brilliant work, brother.
No, I appreciate that. No, I can't wait for those papers to get out into the world. I was sad that the tour didn't come to Philadelphia, but it did stop in Newark. It's in Detroit, and I think the last stop will be in Baltimore, so it'll be pretty close to Philadelphia. Doc, for folks who are hearing this back and forth between this administration and higher education, who are like, why should we care about these elite institutions? Why should we care that the president of the United States is essentially dictating to Harvard University that they cannot admit students who are not American citizens?
First, they came from Harvard, and I wasn't in Harvard. I didn't say anything. Then they came from Princeton, and I wasn't at Princeton. They didn't say anything. Then they came for Temple, and I wasn't at Temple. They didn't say anything. Then they came for Drexel, and I wasn't attending Drexel, and I didn't say anything. But dadgummit, they came for the, Community College of Philadelphia, and no one was left to speak up for me. You get what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Martin Niemöller, the famous German pastor who made that statement, that when he was in Nazi Germany, he ignored others who were being attacked, and then when they attacked him, there was no one else left to be his ally. Because when if they're attacking Harvard, dude, how long before they attack you? They start with the big boy in the room, the big girl in the room, the big institution in the room. And the attack on Harvard, whether you think they're an elitist institution with a $50 billion endowment, which they do have, this is unjust for an American president to assert the province of his power over these institutions, and to maliciously and deceptively misuse that power and abuse that authority in order to dictate his beliefs about how things should go in the name of anti-Semitism. And they have perpetuated some of the most anti-Semitic acts we can see, certainly some of the most anti-Semitic gestures and rhetorical gestures of which we know. And so we got to call BS on that and say, we want our Jewish brothers and sisters to stand up and say, don't protect us like this, because you ain't protecting us. You're using us. You're exploiting us to do dirty deeds in the name of protecting Jewish brothers and sisters from anti-Semitism. Now, there is real anti-Semitism that exists. We see those two Israeli
Americans who were murdered outside of an event where they were actually trying to work towards supporting efforts to get aid into Gaza, but
it's just evil, bro.
Yeah.
It's just evil.
Yeah.
When you have that kind of disregard for context, situation, and circumstance, that's just evil. Ain't no justification for that. And I'm for Palestinian brothers and sisters, man, of being relieved from the horrors that they confront, but that ain't the way. So there are legitimate ways to oppose anti-Semitism, and there are some failures on our campuses that need to be addressed. But I wish we could get the same love for anti-blackness that's happening on campuses. I wish we could have some support for the gay and lesbian and trans people. Dadgum, dog. We could all be in the same boat. And I wish our Jewish brothers and sisters would push that point and say it's not just about us, it's about all of us who are confronting these issues. And if it were about all of us, we'd have to cease these efforts that have been undertaken in the name of anti-Semitism and fighting it, I should say, that have been anti-just, anti-democratic, and anti-American at its root.
Doc, news also came down the pipe yesterday that the Department of Justice is pulling all of its current operative consent decrees, all of them, Louisville, Minneapolis, all of them. And this news is right on the eve of the 5-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. I wonder, how do you see this particular moment? I mean, again, it feels like, how can we be 5 years out from something that seems like it was 5 minutes ago, but we are 5 years out this Sunday from that terribly disgusting, dark moment in this nation's history. And we have a president who has been weaponizing this DOJ in different ways. But on the eve of this particular anniversary, they have announced that they are essentially retracting all of the consent decrees that have been operable over the last several years.
It's just horrendous. It's an affront to any sense of justice. Don't call it a Justice Department. Call it a just us, white people department. When you spot black people on site and see them as the enemy, you get rid of the woman who ran the U.S. Mint. You get rid of the director of the Black Smithsonian. When you get rid of a 4-star black general and put in a mediocre white person. This is going on across the board. This is the textbook definition of racist. And to deny these legitimate creeds put in the consent decrees, put into order, is an affront to George Floyd and his memory 5 years after it occurred. And this is an insult. So all those black people who stood for, the president, where are you now? What have you to say now about the systemic dismantling of all the advantages that should accrue to us? And then the DEI, the anti-DEI executive orders, the way in which not only are these consent decrees being delegitimized and therefore dismantled, but in terms of voting, in terms of DEI, in terms of black businesses, in terms of across the board programs and policies directed toward disadvantaged minoritized communities, whether they are lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, whether they are other able people, or whether they are African American or women. And we know white women take advantage of these programs more than any others, whether it's affirmative action or even in the case of DEI, and yet they are not made to bear the burden of the so-called mediocrity that is characteristic of any recipient of DEI. DEI is a judgment on an American society that refused to treat us justly from the beginning. There's no shame in our game to be the perpetuators of a legacy of DEI that should have prevailed long ago. Without DEI or its spirit, we wouldn't have had Jackie Robinson playing baseball. We wouldn't have had Michael Jordan playing basketball. He wasn't the first black person to play, but without that legacy of Earl Lloyd and others, he wouldn't have been playing right now. So, in the day that he was playing. So the point is that we have to pay attention to how this administration has not only systematically dismantled key components of the civil rights agenda, but that this man has symbolically gestured toward a black annihilation, a black erasure. This is coming close to, if not already, ethnic erasure, certainly racial erasure. And we have to be honest about that and continue to raise our voices, which is why I'm about to go into this rally right now and participate in this incredibly important work. One of many things that black people across this nation are doing.
Absolutely. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, bro, I know you got to run into the State of the Power People Tour right there in Detroit, in your home city. Do your thing. As always, we appreciate you taking time out of your crazy schedule to talk to us for a few minutes here on Evening WURDs.
You're listening to The Week on WURD. Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
This is The Week on WURD, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on WURD Radio. Make sure you look for and follow us at WURD Radio on social media. Up next, George Fatheree joined Wake Up With WURD and discussed how Black Americans are continuously affected by the wealth and land disparity.
Joining us now is George Fatheree. He's founder of the Black Land Loss Narrative Archive Project. It's a nonprofit initiative dedicated to collecting, preserving, and amplifying the overlooked stories of Black land loss in America. George Fatheree, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
excited to be back.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
So, this whole land loss thing, people have been fighting over land forever. There have been groups that have been pushed off of land forever. Black people have experienced this in so many ways in America. We're still suffering from it. I just heard a statistic that the racial wealth gap has widened, that the average Black family now has 15% of the wealth of the average white family. A lot of that tied to land. What's the link between wealth and land?
It's exactly what you say. It's 1-to-1, and you're right on with the statistics. I live here in the state of California, and what's amazing to me, Solomon, is Black home ownership today, 2025, in the state of California, is 2 percentage points lower than it was in the 1960s, when it was legal to discriminate against somebody on selling them a house based on the color of their skin. We've gone backwards. And the reason I started the Black Land Loss Narrative Archive Project, and I know that that's a mouthful, but the website is blacklandloss.org. The reason I started this project is because we need to never forget the connection between what happened in the past. And when I say in the past, I've got an expansive definition of the past. So we're talking about the stories we're collecting. These are things that happened 100 years ago, but these are things that happened 10 years ago. And that's a point we need to drive home with this project is we're not talking about just stuff that happened 150 years, 175 years ago. We can look as recently as, the financial recession and the housing meltdown, and we see continued racially discriminatory practices that are intended to deprive Black folks the right to own property and build family and intergenerational wealth. And so what I realized, though, was every year that goes by, we start to lose some of these stories. They start to disappear as the great-grandmothers die, the great-uncles die, the story keepers pass. And when we lose these stories, we lose a critical part of our history and a critical piece to help us understand how it is that we got to where we are today. And so the Black Land Loss Narrative Archive Project, it's an effort to collect, preserve, and amplify these stories of Black land loss so that we can work together and develop policies and public awareness and programs to start to turn the corner on this.
Okay. So one of the stories that I wanted to kind of dig into that we just touched on the last time is what happened when America began to build its interstate system, where they chose to build those highways, what neighborhoods they decided to build them through, and how that affected Black wealth, Black home ownership, Black communities.
Yeah, so you talk about the highway system that was built in the 50s and 60s, and it's fair to say that was built on the homes of African American families. The piece of the story that I want to talk about is what happened just before the highway system came in. Mm-hmm. So you had, you started to see these thriving Black communities in cities like Chicago, in cities like Detroit, in cities like Baltimore. And what you saw as the Black population grew and became more affluent, they needed more housing. And so what you saw was this very, sophisticated scheme by white con men who would go into white neighborhoods that were kind of on the border of where the Black families were moving in. So they go into these white neighborhoods and they would basically say like, hey, what do you think about the Black family moving in across the street? Doesn't that make you nervous that your property values are going down? And the white family said, what do you mean black family moving in? And said, yeah, there's black families moving in. And we heard there's more that are coming to the neighborhood, and it's really going to devastate property values in this neighborhood. And so these charlatans, basically, they caused white flight from these communities. The real estate agents bought those homes, and they bought them on the cheap, because they basically said, hey, if you don't sell now, your house is going to be worth half of what it is once black families move in. So they bought these homes on the cheap. They turned around and they sold these homes to black families, and they marked them up 5 or 6 times. And there's data. You can go in the property records. You could see the markup in the price. Now, black folks at the time could not get, private loans the way that the white folks who bought homes could. They couldn't get the bank loans. And so it was the seller, these real estate agents, who had bought the homes, who would sell them the house. And they sold it to them on contract, which was basically a trap that would allow them to lose the homes, and the agent could resell it over and over again. And so it was a whole scheme that was put together to deprive black people of the rights of home ownership and exploit them financially.
Wow. So it reminds me of a show I saw, and I forget the name of it, but it was a show about this family, black family, moved to California. And the real estate agent sold them the house, and the white families were trying to get them to move out, and they told the white families their houses weren't going to be worth as much. And so it was based on that truth and that narrative that you tell. And so the black families experienced that at that time, and it reminds me of what happened in 2008. When people were getting mortgages that they couldn't afford. The banks knew they couldn't afford the mortgages. Then when the crisis hit, people lost their homes en masse. Same thing.
Look, this is not, it's not new, and it also isn't really slowing down. And here's the reason we started the project. And I want to go back. I want to talk about the city of Manhattan Beach, California. So Manhattan Beach, California is where a lot of your listeners are familiar with the Bruce's Beach story. Mm-hmm. This is a story about a black couple in the early 1900s. They came across country. They built a thriving, successful beach resort right on the water in the city of Manhattan Beach. Black folks would come from all over the Western United States to enjoy a week or a weekend of leisure and relax. Of course, a lot of the white neighbors were not happy about the success of Bruce's Beach. And so fast forward about a decade, in 1924, the city hatched a scheme to take that property in a racially motivated eminent domain. Now, what your listeners may not know is it wasn't just the Bruce family and Bruce's Beach that was taken in that eminent domain action. When the city launched that eminent domain to take Bruce's Beach, they drew the eminent domain map big enough to pick up every parcel of land and every home that was owned by a black family in the city of Manhattan Beach at the time. Black families had kind of bought land and moved close so they could be close to Bruce's Beach. So about 5 or 6 other black families in that area, they all lost their property in that 1924 eminent domain action. Now, why am I mentioning this? You fast forward today, 2025, city of Manhattan Beach, California, and Los Angeles County. It's got the lowest black population of any city in the county, 0.5% black population. But if you don't know that history, if you don't understand that story, you look at that statistic and you come to the false conclusion. You say, well, the real estate's expensive in Manhattan Beach, and so, black folks can't afford to live there. Or, black folks don't like to live that close to the ocean or the water. It's not their type of community. That's all wrong, right? We owned property in Manhattan Beach. We built homes. We were raising our families in Manhattan Beach, and it was taken from us. And 100 years later, you can see the legacy of that taking. And that's why these narratives are important, because these narratives, these stories, help change our narrative of how we understand how we got to where we are today. So that's what we're doing in collecting and preserving and really amplifying these histories. It's not just so that we don't lose them. It's so that we understand how it is we got to where we are today.
Yeah. So eminent domain, that's a tool that, of course, has been used over and over and over again in cities across the country. It was used during urban renewal, used with the building of the highway systems. Explain how eminent domain works.
Sure. So the government, and this is the government at every level, local, state, and federal, the government has a superpower. And that superpower is the government can come in and they can say, we need your land, we need your property for the public good. Now, historically, Solomon, you're right. The public good was understood to be something like a highway, a public road. But you look, and throughout history, a public good has been, we need to build a middle school, right? We worked with a family in Seattle, Washington, right outside Seattle, Washington. This family had 10 acres of land, and the school district showed up and they said, we need that land to build a middle school. They weren't happy that a black family owned 10 acres in the middle of Renton, Washington. They said, we need that land to build a middle school. The family said, what are you talking about? We can see the middle school in town from our front porch. You've already got a middle school. And the district persisted, and eventually the district bought that land. They paid about $40,000 for 10 acres. District held that property for 2 years. They turned around and sold that land to a Washington developer who built 200 homes on it. Those homes now sell for about $900,000 to $1.2 million a piece. City never built a middle school on that. So when you look over time, it wasn't just public roads and highways. It was middle schools. It was shopping centers, shopping malls, universities. And so eminent domain gives the government the right to come in and say, hey, we need this land, we need this property for a public good. And that public good can basically be anything that the government determines. And they can take that land. Now, they're supposed to pay fair market value. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But it's how do you value land that's been in a family, land that's going to be used to help your family build generational wealth? Just giving somebody a check for the fair market value of that land today, it's not like you could go next door and buy a similar plot. So it's, eminent domain has an important purpose that it plays in our society. The problem is, historically, if you look at where it's used, it's been used disproportionately to discriminate against and take land that's owned by Black and brown folks.
Mm-hmm. So how did urban renewal work? And do you have any stories from people who were the victims of that? I don't know any other word to use for it other than victim.
No, victims is the right word. So, urban renewal, again, it's one of these schemes. And what they did is they, so first the policies, right, initially were around concentrating blacks in certain limited areas of the city, right? So, back 60, 70 years ago, you had racial zoning, which said this part of town is where the blacks could live. So you would concentrate all the blacks. And what happened is you would end up with massive overcrowding because the blacks couldn't move out to the other neighborhoods. You had massive overcrowding. When you've got overcrowding and when you've got some of the other factors, like when you've got poverty, that's the result of lower wages. And what happens is sometimes these neighborhoods get run down. And so then what the city would do is the city would come in and they'd say, this building's not to code, that's not to code, this is in violation. And they would red tag all these properties and force the residents out. They would then take that property and transfer it to a developer. It was not a black developer. It was typically a white developer to redevelop the property using government subsidy. That's what urban renewal was, right? It was like forcing black communities off their land so that the property could be redeveloped using government subsidies for white folks to move into. So that's but what I want to say is, like, you've mentioned two of the strategies that are some of the more common ones, eminent domain, urban renewal. As part of this project, we're learning that that's just the tip of the iceberg. There were so many different schemes and strategies and policies and concerted efforts that were used to force Black people off of land that they had acquired, land that was intended to help them build intergenerational wealth. And so what we're trying to do with this project is collect these stories to make sure that they're not lost. And if your listeners visit our website, that's blacklandloss.org, there's a button at the top of the homepage. It says share your story. They can click that button. They can go in and they can type if they've heard something about their family or if they know somebody, and someone from our team will follow up to help collect and preserve their story.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff always. George Fatheree, founder of the Black Land Loss Narrative Archive Project. It's a nonprofit initiative dedicated to collecting, preserving, and amplifying the overlooked stories of Black land loss in America. The website is blacklandloss.org. George Fatheree, thanks for joining us this morning on WURD.
You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. Stay connected on the go with the new and improved WURD Radio app. Search WURD Radio in your app store. Stream every show with increased clarity, easily access WURD TV, EcoWord, and Livelihood. Remember, Black Media Matters. Get the new and improved WURD Radio app today. Available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. This is the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit wordradio.com. That's WURDradio.com. Our last conversation for this episode features Natasha Terrell and Jasmine Anderson in conversation with reality check host Tonya Pendleton.
Memorial Day kicks off the summer travel season. And that's why we have the ladies of Travel Fly Sexy with us today. Natasha Terrell and Jasmine Anderson are here to tell you what things you should watch out for as you head out on these streets and on these planes and on these trains and everything else. How you doing today, ladies?
So good.
Oh, it's good to see you. Everybody has on great glasses today if you're watching online. Well, ladies, let me ask first, when you're preparing for these trips and whether you're driving or flying or however you decide to travel, what are some of the things that you need to look out for in order not to make mistakes that could be costly?
Well, I know a big one is when you're traveling abroad, specifically Europe and other countries, with luggage. And this recently happened to me. So I'm speaking from experience. Even as a world traveler of 10 plus years, I'm still a victim in some cases. So
yeah, I saw that picture in all those suitcases. I said, oh no, Natasha.
So one of the biggest things with traveling abroad in Europe versus traveling in the States is our carry-on luggage allowance size. So in the States, you could really get your you can get a pretty big carry-on onto some of the aircrafts and not have to pay. However, once you go across the pond, they are very strict on how much your carry-on can weigh. In the United States, typically, we're not weighing our carry-ons necessarily. We're just making sure that they have a certain amount of width to fit in the parameters. But when you're in Europe, they will absolutely charge you for your carry-on because it will be considered oversized. And you will say to them, well, I've gallivanted around Miami, Houston, Atlanta, Vegas, and ain't never been charged. And they're going to tell you, run to me their coins. So, you certainly want to be aware of the baggage allowances for sure, because it can cost you, especially checking bags at the gate.
So even your carry-ons have to be weighed if you're heading overseas. So if you're thinking that you bought that advertised, this can fit in anything carry-on piece of luggage, you head to Europe and they might say, nah, that's too big. Or should you look out for those kinds of suitcases to make sure that you are following the requirements worldwide?
Well, yes, absolutely. So the measurements are indeed different. So that suitcase that you might think is perfect for your Delta flights here in the States might be a centimeter or an inch too tall to count as a carry-on or to fit as a free carry-on item. So you do want to make sure you're checking those. I actually flew with a European airline, Flyplay. And they're literally a centimeter off. So it's like 18 here in the States and about 17 inches for their airline. So you definitely want to look into those specific details because you would hate to pack and now you're causing $100 more to your trip just because of your suitcase.
I mean, it's just a centimeter. Were they that strict about it?
That's what I said, Tonya.
Yes. They are.
There is the metric system that is in use around the world. So that could throw some things off when you're trying to measure. So that is indeed a good tip. And I would also say, what about your bag's weight?
Yes. Another thing is overpacking. That's going to cost you as well. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not overfilling those bags, but you don't want to overpack them as far as the weight too. And I know, Tosh, you mentioned on your recent post of leaving space for items that you're bringing back, especially if you are going to across the pond to Europe and you're possibly looking to do some high-end fashion shopping and bringing back some things. You don't want to pay for those items and then have to pay for another suitcase to bring those items back.
Well, no, this is a lot though. So you're saying pack light, and then you're saying worry about the weight and the height. But now, if I'm overseas and I'm shopping, well, I want to bring back some things, some bags, some shoes, some goodies. And now, how do I do that?
I'll tell you, it's a very layered experience. And I'm someone who will take advantage of the VAT tax. And if you're unfamiliar with that, you do get a tax break in some cases and a tax credit, I should say, for your purchases abroad. So you certainly want to go to the stores with your passport in hand, because you have to provide that in order to qualify for these. And then you will redeem it at the airport to receive that credit prior to your departure from the country. So that's just a little bit about the VAT tax. For those that may not be aware. But yes, I recently packed a checked bag, but I didn't fill it because I knew that I wanted to do a little bit of shopping. But also in the back of my mind, I was still strategic because I was like, I don't want this bag to be overweight. Granted, in the States, typically the weight allowance in most of the major airline carriers is about 50 pounds. In some Europe, with some European travelers, it's 40, 42. So you might have thought you were good going, but then you might have challenges coming back. So it's really important because this information is not hidden. It's not hidden from travelers. It is available to you when you're booking. It's available on the site. All airlines have a baggage policy, so you can really see the difference in those weight preferences, if you will. And then also you have the at-home luggage weighers that you can kind of gauge how much you actually, or how much your bags actually weigh. But it's a thing. It's a thing to be cautious of.
What are some of and thank you for that, because that is a lot of information. Because first of all, they want you to pack light and put everything into a tiny bag. I think you probably just need to come up with a jumpsuit and a pair of flats and then figure out how to rock that with a couple of different things, because you're not going to be able to pack anything and shop. That's what it sounds like. Smart packing. Are there some other tips? I disagree with this. Are there some other tips that we need to know?
I think when it comes to costly mistakes right now, a big thing, and we talked about it a few months ago, is a mistake that's going to cost you is not having that real ID. A lot of people have been experiencing large wait times right now as we're making that transition. Obviously, a few weeks ago, it was fully implemented that you need to have your real ID or a valid passport to travel, whether it's in the U.S. or passport for internationally. But that has been adding on a lot of wait time to people's experience. So it's going to cost you time and money if you're just not prepared for that. God forbid you miss a flight because you don't have the proper ID, or the whole trip's canceled because now you can't get into the airport because you don't have the proper ID.
So this is a really critical point, and thank you for bringing that up, Jasmine, because the thing is, if you have a passport, you can go everywhere. But Absolutely. You can't get a passport overnight. I mean, they do have some passport expediters, but generally you need a little bit of time. So if you are planning, let's say, a trip for Memorial Day and you thought you could get on that plane, all you have is a driver's license and it's not a real ID, you won't be able to take that trip, and you may lose money, as you referenced, if you have put money into something that is non-refundable. Flights often non-refundable. Sometimes trips are non-refundable. So that is very, very critical. If you don't have a passport and you plan to travel by plane, you can no longer do it without a real ID enhanced driver's license. And that may be brought home to people who thought they were going to fly to the cookout, Atlanta or Savannah, or wherever they were going, only to find out, wait a second, I didn't get that real ID. So that is a pretty costly situation. But the good news is, if you get a passport, you can go anywhere in the world. You just have to have that time to take the pictures and have the passport get returned to you. So that's something to think about. Can you get an expedited passport still?
Absolutely.
Yes. And how long does it take to get an expedited passport if you need one on average?
On average, I believe it's up to 2 weeks for the expedited, and then 4 to 6 weeks for the standard process.
So even an
there's a however. There is a passport agency in Philadelphia at 9th and Market, if I'm not mistaken. And you can make an appointment for what they're calling still same day passport. You can visit the website travel.state.gov and look at the criteria that you would have to, basically that'll help you qualify for this. You have to be traveling within a certain amount of time. You have to have a confirmed itinerary and so forth. So it's all listed there. But if you qualify, you could go to the passport agency at, again, I think it's 9th and Market, and attempt to get a same day passport. That's the only one I know of locally, but it's an option. But it's a gamble as well, too, because you have to try to get an appointment or you have to try to walk in. So obviously the better bet is to do the process as standard, to Jasmine's point, 2 to 4 weeks or 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 weeks for standard.
Well, with everyone now trying to get a real ID, though, we may be experiencing more wait times even for that. But it is good to know that's an option in Philadelphia, particularly for people if they have any kind of travel related emergencies and have to get someplace really quickly. Now, before we go, let's get one more tip that can save us some money while we're traveling. With the Memorial Day weekend on the horizon, what's one more thing that we should make sure that we do to save some money and not have a costly mistake while traveling?
Jasmine may have a different one, but I'm going to say that assuming every destination has a warm climate, because the amount of times that I've been with someone who needed to purchase a jacket, needed to purchase a sweatsuit or sweatshirt, because you see the content online of this destination in all of its glory under the sun. But the reality is a lot of places get the same 4 seasons that we do in Philadelphia. And because of all the differences with climate change, places are staying cooler longer. So even if you think of us right now, it's a 55-degree morning here at the end of May. So please, before you need to shell out money for an expensive airport hoodie, just bring a jacket.
Yes. And just to add to that, that's just smart packing, making sure that you have, like you mentioned, Tonya, those essential pieces, jumpsuit, sneakers, light jacket that you can kind of layer throughout the trip, that obviously you're not overpacking, but you're also not underpacking and underprepared to where you have to spend more money in destination, because that's not what we're traveling for new clothes.
That goes both ways. And also, if you're a plus size, I'm going to tell you right now, bring something that you can wear, because you are not going to find plus size clothing unless you're headed to London, which for some reason has a lot of plus size options. But I can tell you that I've been to Toronto in the winter when it was warm, and I went to Paris in the summer and it was cold. So you do have to be careful and pack. Layers is probably a good idea, light layers. So because you got to squeeze them into that suitcase. Remember, hoodies can be thick. And definitely it's probably a good idea, since we know we got to keep the packing light if we're heading overseas, so we don't get those charges, to get some layering going on and to make sure that you have some options that are seasonal, whatever the season may be. So exactly. I think those are all good tips. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us as always on Reality Check, and tell us where we can find you, ladies, the Travel Fly Sexy podcast and everything else.
Absolutely. You can check us out at Travel Fly Sexy on social media, and our podcast streams everywhere that you listen to your podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon, and safe travels.
You're tuned into The Week on Word.
Why is Word important to the community?
Black media disseminates all of the things in our culture.
Now it gives our people a voice, you feel me?
I wouldn't see myself.
It gives people that looks like me a chance to relate to what's going on in the world.
It's coming from us is like more important, like we tap in more to it, if you know what I mean.
I wanted to see what other little black girls and now what people my age would want to see.
What other way can we all kind of get on the same page and hear that all if we're not, if we don't have media to share it with?
We are WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at WURDradio.com and on the Word Radio app.